Hands on the vehicle! The sheriff cuffed Evelyn Carter after dispatch had already cleared her. Bruised and trembling, the 70-year-old grandmother only said, "Remember what you're doing." Behind the restaurant glass, nobody moved. Then Danielle's phone flashed. "Marcus, outside!" A black government SUV rolled into the lot, and when its rear door opened, the sheriff had no idea who was stepping out, or what his own camera had already captured. "Get her out of my restaurant!" Sheriff Robert Harlan's voice cut through the hawthorn grill so sharply that forks stopped halfway to mouths. Evelyn Carter looked up from her chair. She was 70 years old, dressed for Sunday in a simple cream-colored dress she had pressed herself that morning. A small gold cross rested at her throat. Her silver-streaked hair was pinned neatly at the back of her head. Nothing about her looked threatening. Nothing about the half-finished plate in front of her suggested trouble. Yet Harlan stood over her as though she had committed a crime. "I paid for my lunch, Sheriff," Evelyn said quietly. "I'm not bothering anybody." Harlan's jaw tightened. Around them, the hawthorn grill had gone unnaturally still. Only moments earlier, the restaurant had been alive with Sunday noise. The clink of silverware against china, low conversations beneath warm brass chandeliers, ice shifting inside tall glasses of sweet tea. Now the only sound came from the kitchen doors swinging softly behind Evelyn's table. Across from her, Danielle Carter slowly lowered her fork. At 27, Danielle had learned to recognize danger before it announced itself. "Sheriff," she said, "my grandmother hasn't done anything." Harlan didn't even look at her. "I wasn't talking to you." Danielle pushed her chair back. Evelyn reached across the table and touched her wrist. It was a small gesture. "Stay calm." Danielle understood. She remained seated, but her eyes never left Harlan. Deputy Ryan Mercer stood several feet behind his sheriff. He was 34, broad-shouldered, with one hand resting near his duty belt. His expression was different from Harlan's. Not anger, uneasiness. Restaurant owner Linda Whitmore stood near the register with both hands pressed against the edge of the counter. At 58, Linda had spent years learning the names and preferences of Millbrook's most influential customers. She knew exactly who Robert Harlan was. Everybody in the room did. And that seemed to be the problem. Harlan leaned closer to Evelyn. "I told you to leave." Evelyn looked directly into his eyes, and I asked why. Something changed in his face. Perhaps he had expected fear. Perhaps he had expected an apology. What he got instead was a 70-year-old woman asking a reasonable question, in a voice so calm it left him nowhere to hide from it. "I don't owe you an explanation." Evelyn took a slow breath. "Then I don't understand why you expect me to leave." A man at a nearby table stared down at his plate. A woman near the window tightened her fingers around her water glass. Nobody spoke. Danielle glanced around the dining room. 20, maybe 30 people could see what was happening. Nobody moved. "Grandma," Danielle whispered. "I'm all right." Harlan heard her. His mouth curled slightly. "No, ma'am. You're not." His hand closed around Evelyn's upper arm. Danielle shot to her feet. "Take your hand off her!" Several people gasped. Evelyn barely had time to turn before Harlan pulled. Her chair scraped violently across the tile. Her hip struck the edge of the table, sending a glass of sweet tea tipping sideways, ice scattered across the white tablecloth. Evelyn lost her footing. Her glasses slipped from her face. They struck the floor with a brittle crack. For one terrible second, nobody breathed. Evelyn caught herself against the table, but her mouth struck its edge. When she straightened, a small line of blood had appeared at her lip. A red drop landed on the collar of her cream church dress. Danielle stared at it. Something inside her expression changed. "Grandma." She reached for Evelyn. Harlan moved between them. "Stay back." "You hurt her." "I said stay back." Danielle's hands trembled. Then she remembered the phone in her purse. She pulled it out, opened the camera, and pressed record. Harlan noticed. "You put that away." "No." It was the first time Danielle's voice had become completely steady. "I'm recording." Harlan stared at her, then at the phone, then back at Evelyn. The little red recording indicator continued counting. 5 seconds. 6, 7. Deputy Mercer shifted his weight. "Sheriff?" Harlan turned his head. "What?" Mercer hesitated. His eyes moved toward Evelyn's bleeding lip. "We should probably slow this down." Harlan's expression hardened. "You telling me how to do my job?" "No, sir." "Then don't." Mercer fell silent. That silence seemed louder than anything else in the room. Evelyn bent carefully toward the floor. One lens had popped from her glasses. Before she could reach them, Harlan caught her arm again. "Leave those. They're my glasses." "I said leave them." Evelyn slowly straightened. Her eyes were wet now, but she refused to let the tears fall. She looked at Harlan, then at Mercer, then beyond them at the restaurant full of people. Faces turned away. One diner suddenly became fascinated by his napkin. Another stared through the window. Linda remained frozen beside the register. Not one person came forward. Evelyn looked back at Harlan. "You don't have to hurt me." She didn't raise her voice. That made the words worse. Danielle felt something tighten painfully in her chest. Her grandmother wasn't begging. She was reminding him, reminding a man wearing a badge that he still had a choice. Harlan ignored it. "Turn around." Evelyn blinked. "For what?" His hand moved toward the handcuffs on his belt. The metal clicked softly as he touched them. Danielle stepped forward. "There is no reason to arrest her. Back up. She's 70 years old. Back up. You haven't even said what she supposedly did." Harlan finally faced Danielle. "You want to join her?" The threat settled over the restaurant. Danielle stopped. Not because she wanted to, because Evelyn looked at her and gave the smallest shake of her head. "Stay calm." Danielle swallowed hard. Then she raised the phone slightly higher. The camera kept recording. Harlan turned back toward Evelyn. "Hands where I can see them." "They are where you can see them. Don't get smart with me." "I'm not." Evelyn's voice remained almost painfully gentle. "I'm answering you." Harlan reached for her again. This time Evelyn's purse slipped from the back of her chair. It hit the tile and opened. The contents scattered beneath the table. A worn leather wallet, a small bottle of medication, a packet of tissues, a ring of keys with a blue plastic tag, a pocket-sized Bible with softened corners, and something Danielle had not expected to see. A small black presentation case. It slid across the polished floor and stopped near Harlan's boot. Danielle's breath caught. Embossed on the lid was a faded gold seal, an eagle, a shield, words arranged in a circle around them. Federal words, official words. Harlan glanced down. For perhaps half a second, his eyes rested on the case. Then he nudged it aside with his boot. "Pick up her stuff, Mercer." Mercer approached. He bent down and reached first for the Bible. Then he saw the black case. His hand stopped. The color seemed to leave his face. Danielle noticed. Harlan didn't. "What are you waiting for?" Mercer picked up the case without answering. Danielle stared at it. She knew exactly what it was. She also knew why her grandmother almost never carried it. A strange mixture of fear and disbelief crossed her face. Then the phone in her other hand vibrated. For an instant, she thought it was interfering with the recording. It vibrated again. A message banner appeared across the top of the screen. Danielle looked down. 2 words. "Marcus, arriving." Her eyes lifted toward the front windows. Beyond the glass, sunlight shimmered over the parking lot. Nothing yet. No car pulling in. No figure approaching. Just the hot Georgia afternoon and rows of parked vehicles beneath the white glare. Behind her, Harlan pulled the handcuffs free from his belt. Ratchet. Ratchet. The sound was small, mechanical, final. Evelyn looked at the cuffs, then at her granddaughter. Danielle met her eyes. Neither woman said Marcus's name. Neither explained the federal seal. And Sheriff Robert Harlan, standing in the middle of the silent Hawthorne grill with a pair of handcuffs in his hand, had no idea that the two details he had just dismissed were about to become the most important details in the room. Hours before Sheriff Robert Harlan reached for those handcuffs, Evelyn Carter stood barefoot in her kitchen watching morning light creep across a worn linoleum floor. Millbrook, Georgia was still waking up. A city bus sighed at the corner 2 blocks away. Somewhere beyond the row of modest brick duplexes, a delivery truck rattled over a pothole. The air coming through Evelyn's screen door smelled faintly of damp earth, cut grass, and coffee from the apartment next door. Evelyn had been awake since 5:40. She hadn't needed an alarm in decades. At 70, her body still remembered a working woman's schedule. She filled an old kettle and placed it on the stove, then crossed to the front window and opened the blinds. 2 potted geraniums sat on the sill. One was blooming beautifully. The other looked determined to die despite everything Evelyn had done for it. She touched one drooping leaf. "Don't start with me today." A smile crossed her face. The duplex wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen with cabinets that had been painted 3 times. The refrigerator hummed too loudly, and the front steps needed repairing. But it was clean. It was hers, and after everything Evelyn had lost, that mattered. There had been a time when she rented a little house on Carver Street with a pecan tree in the backyard. She had expected to grow old there. Then redevelopment came through that part of Millbrook. Property changed hands, rents climbed, and families who had lived there for decades discovered that memories didn't count as equity. Evelyn packed her life into cardboard boxes. She didn't make speeches about it. She moved. That was what Evelyn had always done when life closed one door without asking whether she was ready. She found another way through. The kettle began to whistle. Evelyn poured hot water over a tea bag and carried the cup into the hallway. Photographs covered one wall, her late husband Samuel smiling in a dark suit outside their church many years earlier. Samuel had been 34 in that picture. He had died at 61 after years working maintenance at a manufacturing plant. Beside him were photographs of Danielle at 22 in her college graduation gown, then at 26 holding the certificate from the Georgia bar. Evelyn stopped at the largest frame. She stood beside a tall black man in a dark suit at the foot of broad marble steps. American flags hung behind them. The man's hand rested gently against Evelyn's shoulder, and she was looking at him instead of the camera. Pride filled her face. At the bottom of the photograph was a brass plate. Morning glare washed across it, hiding the words. Evelyn touched the glass once. "Maybe today," she murmured. Then she went to get dressed. Her cream church dress hung from the closet door, pressed the night before. It wasn't expensive. Evelyn had bought it years earlier and altered it herself until it fit perfectly. Alterations had kept groceries in her kitchen after St. Matthew Regional Hospital outsourced its laundry operation. 28 years. That was how long Evelyn had worked there. 28 years sorting sheets, loading industrial washers, folding gowns, repairing torn linens when the supervisors were desperate. Then one Tuesday afternoon, management gathered the laundry staff and explained that an outside contractor could do the work cheaper. Cheaper. Evelyn remembered that word. Not better, not kinder. Cheaper. At 62, she walked out carrying a cardboard box containing a coffee mug, a retirement pin she hadn't technically earned yet, and a photograph of her old shift. Finding another full-time job at that age proved harder than anyone wanted to admit. So she returned to something her mother had taught her long ago. Sewing, a hem here, a church dress there, a suit jacket altered for a job interview. $5, $10, sometimes nothing, especially when she knew the person asking couldn't afford it. That was how New Hope Community Kitchen became part of her life. By 8 that morning, Evelyn was there. The kitchen occupied the first floor of an aging brick building beside a tire shop. Steam clouded the windows while industrial pans clattered in the back. Evelyn tied on a faded blue apron. "Sure. You're supposed to be celebrating today," called Walter Price from a folding chair near the pantry. Walter was 76 and recovering from surgery. His cane rested against his knee. "And you're supposed to be home resting," Evelyn answered. Walter grinned. "Doctor said walking was good." "Walking, not sitting in my kitchen stealing biscuits." "That's a matter of interpretation." Evelyn laughed. Before leaving, she packed a brown grocery bag with canned soup, oatmeal, fruit, and bread. Walter saw it. "I can manage." "I know you can." "Then why are you doing that?" "Because managing doesn't mean you have to do everything alone." She placed the bag beside his cane. Walter stared at it for a moment. "Let me pay you." "No." "Evelyn." "No. You are the most stubborn woman in Georgia. That's why I've lasted 70 years. She squeezed his shoulder and moved on. Near the front desk, Ruth Coleman, 81, was staring at a transportation schedule through thick glasses. "My appointment got moved," Ruth said. "Clinic says Tuesday morning now. Shuttle doesn't come to my street Tuesdays." Evelyn pulled out a pen. "Give me the time." "Don't you have enough to do?" "Ruth." The older woman sighed. 9:30. Evelyn wrote it down. "I'll call New Hope's volunteer driver when I get home. If he can't do it, I'll take you myself." Ruth looked at her. "You always say that." "Say what?" "I'll take care of it." Evelyn smiled. "Somebody has to." She never mentioned that gasoline had become expensive. She never mentioned that her car needed tires, and she certainly didn't mention that today was her birthday. Danielle arrived just before 10:30 and found her grandmother stacking food containers. She stood in the doorway in a navy blouse and slacks, shaking her head. "I knew it." Evelyn didn't look up. "Knew what?" "You promised you were taking today off." "I am." "You are literally working. This isn't work. Nobody pays me." "That is not the defense you think it is." Evelyn laughed. Danielle crossed the kitchen and kissed her cheek. "Happy birthday, Grandma." "Thank you, baby." 70. "Don't say it like you're reporting a natural disaster." Danielle smiled, but then her expression softened. She looked around at the worn kitchen, at Walter's grocery bag, at Ruth's transportation schedule tucked beside Evelyn's purse. "You spend your whole life taking care of everybody." "I like people." "People haven't always been very good to you." Evelyn became still. For just a moment, something old passed behind her eyes. The hospital meeting, the boxes on Carver Street, store clerks watching her too closely, managers who suddenly stopped hiring when she arrived for interviews, restaurants where better tables somehow disappeared when she walked through the door. She had learned long ago that bitterness could become another landlord, taking up space inside you and charging rent every day. So she refused to house it. "No," Evelyn said, "they haven't." She tied the grocery bag closed. "But that doesn't tell me who I have to be." Danielle looked at her grandmother for a long moment. Then she held out her car keys. "Come on, church first, birthday lunch afterward. Somewhere cheap." "No, Danielle. You get 170th birthday." "So far." Danielle laughed. Evelyn removed her apron and reached for her purse. Then she stopped. "I almost forgot." "What?" "Nothing." She left Danielle waiting and drove home before church. Inside the duplex, Evelyn walked straight to her bedroom. At the back of the closet, beneath folded scarves, was a small wooden box. She opened it. Inside rested the black presentation case, the same one that only hours later would slide across the hawthorn grill floor and stop beside Sheriff Harlan's boot. Evelyn ran her thumb over the faded gold federal seal, for everything that came before. She closed her eyes briefly, then she slipped the case into her purse. From the hallway, the photograph on the wall caught the sunlight again. This time the glare shifted just enough to expose part of the brass inscription beneath the image. Only 3 words could be seen clearly: United States District. Then a cloud moved across the sun. The hallway darkened. The words disappeared again. Evelyn locked the front door and walked toward Danielle's car, unaware that before the afternoon was over, strangers would search that purse. Blood would stain the dress she had pressed so carefully, and the quiet history she never used to impress anyone would become impossible for an entire town to ignore. By 12:30, the Sunday heat had settled over Millbrook like a heavy quilt. Danielle turned onto Jefferson Avenue with the air conditioner humming and one hand resting loosely on the steering wheel. Evelyn sat beside her with her purse in her lap, watching familiar storefronts pass outside the window. The pharmacy, the old hardware store, the courthouse square with its white columns and trimmed hedges. They had already been to church, and Evelyn was beginning to suspect Danielle's promise of a simple lunch had been deliberately misleading. "You passed Miller's Diner," Evelyn said. "I know. That was our turn." "I know." Evelyn looked at her granddaughter. "Where are you taking me?" Danielle smiled. "Somewhere with cloth napkins." "Oh, Lord. It's your birthday. That doesn't mean I need a waiter who introduces himself before bringing water." Danielle laughed. For the first time that morning, Evelyn leaned back and simply enjoyed herself. Then the Hawthorne Grill came into view. The restaurant occupied a restored brick building near the courthouse district, with tall windows, dark green awnings, and polished brass lettering above the entrance. Sunday diners in pressed shirts and church clothes moved beneath the awning, while expensive SUVs and polished sedans filled the parking lot. Evelyn looked at Danielle. "You shouldn't spend this kind of money on me. I have a job, at legal aid. I still have a job. That is not the same thing." Danielle parked. "You spent years doing alterations after 10-hour shifts so people in this family could have things you couldn't afford for yourself. Let me buy you lunch." Evelyn's expression softened. "You don't owe me anything." "I know." That answer made Evelyn smile. They entered together. Warm yellow light spilled from brass chandeliers onto white tablecloths and dark wood floors. Ceiling fans turned lazily overhead. The room smelled of roasted chicken, butter, coffee, and fresh bread. Conversations overlapped beneath the gentle clinking of silverware. At the hostess stand, Linda Whitmore looked up. Her smile appeared automatically, then hesitated. Only for a second. But Danielle saw it. "Good afternoon," Linda said. "Table for 2, Danielle replied. Linda glanced toward the dining room. Several tables near the tall front windows were empty. Another stood open beneath a framed painting near the center of the room. Linda picked up 2 menus. "This way." She led them past all of them. They crossed nearly the entire restaurant until they reached a small 2-person table beside the swinging kitchen doors. Every few seconds, a server pushed through carrying plates. The hinges squeaked. Heat and kitchen noise escaped each time the doors opened. Danielle stopped. "Excuse me," Linda turned. "There are open tables by the windows." Linda's smile tightened. "Those are reserved." "All of them?" "We're expecting a busy afternoon." Danielle glanced toward the empty tables. There were no reserved signs. Evelyn had seen this kind of moment before. Different restaurant, different year, different face delivering the message. Same feeling, that quiet little calculation about where she belonged. She touched Danielle's arm. "Sir, this is fine." "No, Grandma." "Danielle, we're paying the same as everybody else." Linda's eyes flicked toward nearby diners. Evelyn noticed. She knew exactly where this road could go. And today she didn't want to fight. Not because Danielle was wrong. Because Evelyn had spent too many years allowing other people's ugliness to steal hours she could never get back. She pulled out her chair. Don't let somebody else's manners decide what kind of day you have. Danielle looked at her. Evelyn smiled. Sit down. Linda placed the menus on the table. Your server will be with you shortly. She walked away. Danielle remained standing another moment. Those tables aren't reserved. I know. You saw it too? Baby, I've been black for 70 years. Of course I saw it. Danielle sat. The humor in Evelyn's voice couldn't completely hide the tiredness beneath it. That hurt Danielle more than anger would have. A server brought 2 glasses of sweet tea. Evelyn took a sip. Well what? If you're determined to waste money, I intend to order dessert. Danielle laughed. There she is. The kitchen door swung open behind Evelyn. A burst of voices and clattering pans filled the space. Evelyn didn't complain. She simply shifted her chair a few inches so the door wouldn't strike it. Danielle watched her. You know what bothers me? Many things. Grandma, I've seen your apartment. I know. Danielle tried not to smile. Then she grew serious. You always make things easier for everybody else. Evelyn folded her napkin across her lap. There's enough hard in the world already. That doesn't mean people get to disrespect you. No. Evelyn looked toward the empty window tables. It doesn't. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, sunlight flashed across passing cars. Danielle turned her tea glass between her hands. Do you ever miss Carver Street? The question surprised Evelyn. Yes. The old house? Every day. Evelyn could still picture the pecan tree behind it, the narrow porch, the kitchen window that stuck every summer. Then came the redevelopment notices, the rent increase, the polite letters explaining that the neighborhood was changing. She had worked most of her adult life and still found herself packing boxes because somebody with more money had decided her street was worth more without people like her living on it. I thought I'd stay there forever, Evelyn said. Were you angry? Oh, yes. Danielle waited. What did you do? Packed. That isn't what I mean. Evelyn smiled faintly. I know. She looked down at her hands. The fingers were slightly bent now, marked by decades of laundry work, sewing needles, hot pans, detergent, and labor nobody photographed. I was angry for a long time. Then one Saturday I went to New Hope. They were short on volunteers. By lunchtime I was too busy serving plates to feel sorry for myself. You'd just lost your home. And some of those people didn't know where they were sleeping that night. Danielle shook her head. You make it sound simple. It wasn't. Evelyn looked up. Kindness isn't simple, Danielle. Sometimes it's the hardest thing you can choose. Danielle grew quiet. She thought of Walter's grocery bag, Ruth's transportation schedule, all the alterations her grandmother had done for people who never paid. You should have been a lawyer, Evelyn laughed. Absolutely not. You'd have been good. I don't like arguing. You argue with me. That's recreation. Danielle smiled. Then Evelyn reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're doing work that matters. I mostly fill out forms and tell people things they don't want to hear. You listen to them? I try. Then keep doing that. Evelyn's expression became serious. People can survive a lot when they know somebody heard them. Danielle held her gaze. She would remember those words months later. But neither woman knew that yet. A server approached with bread. Behind her, Linda stood near the front, rearranging menus. Danielle noticed the window tables were still empty. She decided not to mention them again. Not today. Evelyn opened her purse to find a tissue. For a moment, the black presentation case became visible beneath her Bible. Danielle saw the faded gold seal. Her eyebrows lifted. "You brought it?" Evelyn quickly covered it. "I almost forgot. You never carry that." "I know. Why today?" Evelyn looked down at the purse. Something tender passed across her face. 70 makes a woman sentimental. Danielle smiled. "Does Marcus know?" Evelyn gave her a warning look. "Don't start." "I didn't say anything." "You were about to." Danielle laughed and lifted her tea. The name hung between them for only a moment. Marcus. Then it disappeared beneath the ordinary sounds of lunch. At the front of the restaurant, the door opened. The change was immediate. Linda straightened. A server carrying a tray stepped aside. A businessman near the center table looked toward the entrance and began to rise. Even the laughter from one corner seemed to lower. Evelyn noticed before Danielle did. She turned slightly in her chair. A uniformed man stood beneath the brass light of the entryway, one hand resting near his belt. Another deputy stood behind him. The first man's polished badge caught the chandelier light. Sheriff Robert Harlan had arrived. Linda was already hurrying toward him. Danielle followed her grandmother's gaze. "What happened?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She watched the room adjust itself around the sheriff, as though everyone had rehearsed it before. Then Harlan looked across the restaurant, past the businessmen, past the families, past the empty tables by the windows. His eyes reached the back corner. They settled on Evelyn and Danielle, and stayed there. For several seconds, Robert Harlan didn't move. Neither did Evelyn. The distance between them was nearly the length of the dining room, but Evelyn felt the weight of his stare as clearly as if he were already standing beside her chair. Then Harlan smiled at someone near the entrance. Just like that, the moment seemed to disappear. Almost. "Sheriff." Linda Whitmore reached him with the bright, practiced smile of a restaurant owner greeting her most important regular. "Didn't know if we'd see you today." "Sunday, isn't it?" Harlan said it like that settled the matter. At 54, he had the thick build of a man who had spent years making other people move first. His uniform was immaculate. His boots shone beneath the warm restaurant lights. A silver badge sat squarely over his chest, and his duty belt carried the visible symbols of authority: radio, handcuffs, flashlight, holstered sidearm. Deputy Ryan Mercer remained 2 steps behind him. The difference between the two men was immediate. Harlan entered rooms expecting them to change for him. Mercer entered watching to see how they changed. A businessman at the center of the restaurant stood. "Robert?" "Tom." They shook hands. "Still coming Thursday?" "Wouldn't miss it." Another diner lifted 2 fingers in greeting. Harlan nodded. A server hurried toward the largest table near the center. 2 place settings were already there. She removed them anyway, wiped a surface that didn't need wiping, and replaced the silverware. "Your usual table, Sheriff," Harlan smiled. "See? Somebody around here remembers how things work." The server gave a nervous little laugh. Evelyn heard it. So did Danielle. Danielle leaned closer. "That's Harlan. You know him?" "By reputation." Evelyn's eyes remained on the sheriff. "What kind?" Danielle didn't answer. She didn't need to. Harlan shook another hand before sitting. Linda personally brought him coffee, although 3 servers were working the room. Mercer sat opposite him. He looked toward Evelyn's table once. Their eyes almost met. Then he looked away. Danielle lowered her voice. "He's been sheriff for years." "How many?" "I think he's in his 4th term." Evelyn unfolded a piece of bread. "And?" Danielle hesitated. "At the office, people talk." "What people?" "Clients." Evelyn stopped. That changed things. "What do they say?" "Mostly that if Harlan decides he doesn't like you, challenging him makes everything worse." "Has anybody filed complaints?" "Some." What happened? Danielle looked toward Harlan. Nothing that I know of. Evelyn took that in quietly. At the center table, Harlan was laughing. It was a deep, confident laugh that carried easily through the restaurant. He seemed perfectly at home. Maybe more than at home. He seemed like the room belonged to him. A server placed a glass of iced tea beside Mercer. Anything else? No, ma'am. Thank you. Harlan didn't look at her. Coffee's cold. The server touched the pot. I just brewed it. Then brew it better. Mercer glanced at him. Harlan was already looking elsewhere. The server picked up the cup. I'll replace it. She walked away. Mercer lowered his voice. You didn't even taste it. Harlan looked across the table. What? Nothing. That's what I thought. Mercer leaned back. His jaw tightened briefly. Then his face became neutral again. He had learned how to do that. 3 years earlier, Mercer had questioned one of Harlan's roadside detentions in front of another deputy. Nothing dramatic happened that day. No shouting. No written reprimand. Instead, his preferred shifts disappeared. Training requests stopped being approved. Harlan never mentioned the disagreement. He didn't have to. 6 weeks later, Mercer apologized. His schedule returned to normal. That was how Harlan maintained control. Rarely with direct order, usually with memory. At the back table, Danielle noticed her grandmother rubbing one thumb against the side of her index finger. It was an old habit. Evelyn did it when something bothered her. You okay? Fine. You want to leave? Evelyn looked at her. Why would we? Danielle glanced toward Harlan. Because I don't like the way he's looking over here. Evelyn picked up her sweet tea. We haven't done anything. Danielle gave a humorless smile. I know. The answer stayed between them. Evelyn understood exactly what Danielle meant. Being innocent and being safe had never been the same thing. Still, Evelyn refused to let the sheriff chase her away with nothing but a stare. She had paid for her meal. She was celebrating her birthday with her granddaughter. She belonged at that table as much as anyone else. The kitchen doors swung open. A server passed carrying 2 plates. The smell of butter and pepper followed her. For another minute, everything seemed ordinary. Then Harlan looked toward the back again. This time he didn't look away. His eyes moved from Danielle to Evelyn, then to the purse hanging from Evelyn's chair, then back to Evelyn. Linda. The owner was standing near his table. Yes? Harlan nodded toward the rear. Who are they? Linda followed his gaze. Evelyn saw the question before she heard it. Her shoulders stiffened. They're customers, Linda said. I can see that. Harlan continued staring. You know them? Linda hesitated. No. Danielle watched the exchange. She couldn't hear every word, but she understood enough. Linda shifted uncomfortably. The older woman's celebrating her birthday, I think. Harlan's eyebrows lifted. That's so? Yes. From around here? I don't know. Linda attempted a smile. Is there a problem? Harlan finally looked at her. It was subtle, just a change around the eyes. Linda's smile vanished. I'm asking a question. Of course. So? I've never seen them before. That wasn't true. Linda had seen Evelyn at least twice at community fundraisers. Evelyn remembered her. Apparently, Linda didn't, or didn't want to. Harlan leaned back. His attention returned to the 2 women. Mercer followed his gaze. Sheriff. Harlan didn't respond. They're eating lunch. Now Harlan looked at him. I know what they're doing. Mercer held his gaze for a second, then another. It wasn't defiance, not quite, but it was close enough that Harlan noticed. You got something you want to say? Mercer looked down at his tea. No, sir. Harlan smiled without warmth. Good. He reached for his coffee. The replacement cup had arrived. He drank from it. Then he put it down. His eyes remained fixed on Evelyn. At the back table, Evelyn opened her menu again. Danielle stared at her. You seriously reading that? I haven't picked dessert. Grandma. What? That man is staring at us. I know. And you're choosing pie? Evelyn considered the menu. Peach cobbler. Danielle almost laughed despite herself. Evelyn closed the menu. Then her expression softened. Baby, listen to me. Danielle leaned closer. You cannot spend your whole life leaving rooms because somebody wants you uncomfortable. Danielle looked toward Harlan. What if uncomfortable becomes dangerous? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then we deal with what actually happens, not what somebody's stare tells us might happen. She reached across the table. Her hand covered Danielle's. Warm, steady. You belong here. Danielle swallowed. So do you. Yes, Evelyn said. I do. Across the restaurant, Harlan pushed his chair back. The legs scraped across the floor. Conversation weakened almost immediately. Linda turned. Mercer looked up. Sheriff? Harlan stood and adjusted his duty belt. You stay here. Mercer's eyes went toward Evelyn. What's going on? Nothing yet. Harlan straightened his uniform shirt. Then he started walking. One table fell quiet as he passed. Then another. A fork touched a plate with a soft, metallic click. Linda took half a step after him, stopped, and remained beside the center table. Danielle watched him approach. The warmth drained from her face. Evelyn slowly placed her napkin beside her plate. Harlan came closer. 20 feet. 15. 10. His polished boots struck the dark wood floor with deliberate, measured steps. Evelyn could see his expression clearly now. There was no smile, no polite curiosity, no uncertainty. He had already decided something about her before asking a single question. Danielle reached beneath the table and touched her phone inside her purse. Evelyn noticed. Not yet, she whispered. Harlan stopped beside their table. His body blocked part of the chandelier light, throwing a long shadow across Evelyn's untouched dessert menu. He looked at Danielle first, then at Evelyn. His eyes lingered on the cream church dress, the small gold cross, the weathered hands resting calmly beside the plate. Finally, he glanced at the chair Linda had placed them beside. The table near the kitchen, away from the windows, away from the center of the room, as if even that wasn't far enough. You two from around here? Evelyn lifted her eyes to him. Yes, Sheriff. Harlan tilted his head. You know who I am? I know you're the sheriff. Good. He placed one hand on the back of the empty chair beside their table. Danielle could hear her own heartbeat. Evelyn remained still. Harlan looked around the room once, almost casually. Everyone who had been watching suddenly found somewhere else to look. Then he turned back to Evelyn. Let's see some identification. The last fork in the Hawthorne grill stopped moving. Evelyn Carter looked at Sheriff Robert Harlan for several seconds before answering. Not because she was afraid, because she wanted to understand what she had just heard. My identification? That's what I said. Harlan stood beside the table with one hand resting on the chair back. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The badge on his chest carried the volume for him. Evelyn glanced at Danielle, then back at Harlan. May I ask why? A faint smile touched his mouth. You may. He offered nothing else. Evelyn waited. When it became clear he had no intention of explaining, she said, Then why? Harlan pulled the empty chair away from the table but didn't sit. You live in Millbrook? Yes. Where? On the south side. Where on the south side? Danielle's posture stiffened. Evelyn answered carefully. Near Franklin Avenue. How long? Several years. And before that? Evelyn's expression changed. The question touched something deeper than Harlan could have known. Carver Street. Cardboard boxes. A redevelopment notice taped inside a front window. Her old pecan tree disappearing behind the moving truck. But she refused to give him the memory. Why does that matter? Harlan's smile disappeared. I asked the questions. A kitchen door squeaked behind Evelyn. Somewhere inside, a pan struck a counter. The ordinary sounds seemed strangely distant now. Harlan nodded toward Danielle. Who is she? My granddaughter. Name? Danielle answered before Evelyn could. Danielle Carter. Harlan looked at her. You from around here too? Yes. What do you do? Danielle's eyes narrowed. Why are you asking? I asked what you do. Danielle sat straighter. I'm an attorney with a legal aid organization. That caused the smallest change in Harlan's face. Not fear, irritation. Congratulations. Danielle ignored the sarcasm. Hi. Sheriff, is my grandmother suspected of committing a crime? Harlan looked at Evelyn instead of answering. ID, Danielle leaned forward. On what legal basis? Danielle. Evelyn touched her wrist. Her granddaughter turned. Grandma, he can't just... I know. Evelyn's voice remained gentle. Let me speak for myself. Danielle's mouth tightened. Every instinct in her wanted to challenge him. Every bit of legal training told her the questions had no legitimate foundation. But she knew Evelyn too. Her grandmother wasn't surrendering. She was choosing her ground. Danielle sat back. Evelyn faced Harlan. Sheriff, I came here after church to have lunch with my granddaughter for my birthday. We ordered food. We're paying customers. If there is some problem, please tell me what it is. You always this difficult? The question landed harder than his volume suggested. Evelyn blinked once. I don't believe asking why I'm being questioned is difficult. Harlan leaned closer. Maybe I do. Around them, the dining room remained silent. Evelyn could feel people listening. She wondered how many had watched Linda lead them past the empty window tables. How many had noticed Harlan staring. How many understood exactly what was happening. A businessman near the center lifted his coffee cup but didn't drink. A woman by that front window looked directly at Evelyn, then lowered her eyes. Linda stood beside the register. She could stop this, Danielle thought. She could walk over and say Evelyn and Danielle were customers. She could say there had been no complaint. She could say nobody had asked the sheriff to intervene. Linda did none of those things, Harlan continued. You meeting somebody here? No. Waiting for somebody? No. Did somebody tell you to come here? Evelyn frowned. My granddaughter brought me for lunch. That's not what I asked. Then I don't understand your question. Harlan straightened. You seem to have trouble understanding a lot today. Danielle's hand tightened beneath the table. Evelyn saw it. Don't, she whispered. Harlan heard. Something you want to say? Evelyn looked up. Yes. The room seemed to contract. I would like to finish my lunch. For the first time, Harlan's expression openly hardened. He had been given opportunities to turn the interaction into nothing. A joke, a misunderstanding, a question answered and forgotten. Instead, Evelyn's calmness seemed to offend him more with every passing second. He pointed toward her purse. Get your identification. No. Danielle stared at her grandmother. So did Mercer from the center table. Harlan's eyes narrowed. What did you say? Evelyn's hands rested flat beside her plate. I said no. Her voice wasn't defiant. It was clear. You haven't told me I've done anything wrong. You haven't told me why you need my identification. So unless you can give me a lawful reason, I would like to be left alone. A tiny sound moved through the restaurant. Someone inhaled sharply. Harlan looked around. The sound vanished. Then he turned toward Linda. Linda. She approached reluctantly. Yes, Sheriff? These two causing problems? Linda looked at Evelyn. Danielle could almost see the decision happening behind the woman's eyes. Tell the truth, or tell Harlan what he wanted to hear. No, Linda finally said. They've been quiet. Harlan stared at her. Linda immediately added, but I don't want any trouble in the restaurant. Danielle's disbelief broke through. We weren't causing trouble. I didn't say you were. You just implied it. Linda glanced toward the other diners. Please keep your voice down. Danielle nearly laughed. My voice? Evelyn touched her arm again. That gentle hand was becoming the only calm thing in the room. Harlan turned back. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to show me your ID or you're going to leave. Evelyn looked at him. Why? Because I'm telling you to. That isn't a reason. It is today. Mercer rose from his chair. Slowly. Harlan. The sheriff turned. Mercer rarely used his last name without the title. He seemed to realize it too. Sheriff, he corrected. What? Mercer approached several steps, stopping well short of the table. So, if there's no complaint, maybe we should just let them finish. Harlan's eyes became cold. You taking over? No. Then sit down. Mercer remained where he was. Harlan took one step toward him. I said sit down. Mercer's gaze shifted to Evelyn. She saw something there. Shame, maybe fear. Then Mercer returned to his table. He sat. Danielle watched him go. For a second, hope had appeared, then disappeared. Harlan faced Evelyn again. Last chance. Evelyn glanced down at her plate. Her food had gone untouched. Condensation ran down the side of her sweet tea glass and collected in a ring on the white tablecloth. She thought of Walter, insisting on paying for groceries. Ruth worrying about getting to the clinic. Danielle promising her one birthday lunch. Small things. Ordinary things. The kind of things a person should be allowed to have without proving she deserved them. Evelyn raised her eyes. I am not leaving because you decided you don't like seeing me sitting here. The words landed with perfect clarity. Harlan's nostrils flared. I never said anything about not liking you. You didn't have to. Danielle stopped breathing. Harlan stared at Evelyn. The restaurant waited. Then Harlan said, Stand up. No, sir. Stand up. Am I under arrest? Not yet. Then I'd like to finish my meal. Harlan's hand came down on the table. Silverware jumped. Several diners flinched. Get up. Evelyn remained seated. Her face showed pain now. Not physical pain, something older. The exhaustion of having spent 70 years proving that calmness was not guilt. Poverty was not failure. Black skin was not suspicion. And quiet dignity was not permission to be pushed aside. But she didn't give him anger. Harlan seemed to want it. She wouldn't. Sheriff, she said, I have treated you respectfully. I expect the same. That was the moment something in him snapped. His hand shot forward. He closed his fingers around Evelyn's upper arm. Danielle's chair flew backward. Take your hand off my grandmother. Harlan tightened his grip. Sit down. Don't touch her. Danielle reached toward her purse. Not for a weapon, for her phone. Mercer rose again. Linda pressed the hand to her mouth. The businessman at the center table stared. The woman by the window looked away. Evelyn winced as Harlan pulled her toward the edge of the chair. Still, she didn't scream. She looked around the Hawthorne grill, at the people who had heard every question. At the people who knew there had been no complaint. At the people who had watched the sheriff manufacture suspicion out of nothing. Nobody stood. Nobody said stop. Evelyn turned back to Harlan. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You still have time to let go. For half a second, his grip loosened. Mercer saw it. Danielle saw it. Evelyn felt it. There was still a door open for him. A way back. Then Harlan's pride closed it. His fingers tightened. He pulled. Evelyn's chair scraped violently across the floor. And in the silence of the Hawthorne grill, the sound was so sharp that everyone in the room knew something had just crossed a line that could not easily be uncrossed. Evelyn had no time to regain her balance. Sheriff Harlan pulled again. Her hip struck the table. The sweet tea glass tipped over, sending amber liquid and melting ice across the white cloth. A plate slid sideways and struck the floor. Then Evelyn's glasses slipped from her face. They landed beneath the table, crack. One lens broke loose. Without them, the restaurant became a blur of warm lights and indistinct faces. Grandma! Danielle lunged forward. Harlan moved between them. Stay back. You're hurting her. I said stay back. Evelyn tried to steady herself against the table, but her mouth caught the edge as Harlan pulled her upright. Pain flashed through her lip. She tasted blood. Danielle saw the small red stain appear on the collar of the cream dress her grandmother had pressed so carefully that morning. For 1 second, shock erased everything else from her face. Then she grabbed her phone. The camera opened. Record. The timer began counting. Harlan, Mercer said. The sheriff ignored him. Danielle raised the phone. I am recording this. Harlan turned. Put it away. No. That's your warning. Danielle's hand trembled, but the camera stayed pointed at him. My grandmother has not threatened anyone. She has not committed a crime. You are hurting a 70-year-old woman in front of witnesses. Harlan stepped toward her. Evelyn caught Danielle's eye. No, baby. The words were soft. Danielle looked at her. Evelyn shook her head. Not because she wanted Danielle silent, because she knew what frightened men with authority sometimes did when they felt challenged. Keep your distance, Evelyn whispered. Danielle understood. She backed away 1 step, but she kept recording. Harlan turned toward Evelyn again. Her lip was bleeding. Her glasses were broken. Her dress was stained. Still, she stood as straight as she could. You don't have to hurt me, she said. That sentence moved through the room differently than a scream would have. It left no room for anyone to pretend they misunderstood what was happening. A woman near the window covered her mouth. The businessman who had shaken Harlan's hand stared down at his table. Linda stood near the register, pale and motionless. Evelyn looked toward her. Ms. Whitmore? Linda's eyes lifted. You seated us, Linda swallowed. Yes. Did we cause trouble in your restaurant? The question was simple. Linda looked at Harlan, then at Evelyn. No. Harlan's head turned sharply. Linda immediately added, but I just want everyone to stay calm. Danielle stared at her. Everyone? Linda looked away. That hurt Evelyn in a way Harlan's grip couldn't. She had known people like Linda all her life. Not cruel enough to start the injustice. Not brave enough to stop it. Always hoping politeness could make cowardice look neutral. Harlan pointed toward Evelyn's purse. Mercer, search it. Mercer didn't move. Sir, Sheriff, we don't have... Search the purse. We don't have consent. Harlan stepped toward him. I'm conducting an investigation. Into what? The words escaped before Mercer could stop them. The entire room seemed to hear. Harlan's face darkened. You want to discuss procedure with me right now? Mercer looked at Evelyn. Without her glasses, she couldn't clearly see his expression, but she heard the hesitation in his breathing. There's been no complaint, Mercer said. Harlan moved closer. Search the purse. Mercer's jaw tightened. For several seconds, he remained still. Danielle watched him. "Deputy," she said, "you know this is wrong." Mercer looked at her. That was the worst part. He did know. Then he lowered his eyes. He picked up Evelyn's purse. Danielle's face fell. Evelyn said nothing. "Evelyn." Mercer set the purse on the table, as carefully as though gentleness now could erase everything that had come before. It couldn't. He opened it. The first item he removed was a small bottle of prescription medication. He placed it beside Evelyn's plate. Then tissues, a worn leather wallet, a pen, a ring of keys. The blue tag attached to them read, "New Hope Community Kitchen." Harlan picked it up. "What's this?" "I volunteer there," Evelyn said. Harlan dropped the keys onto the table. Next came the Bible. Its dark leather cover had softened at the corners from years of use. Mercer placed it down without opening it. Then his fingers touched something solid. He stopped. Danielle knew what he had found before he pulled it out. The black presentation case. Under the restaurant lights, the faded gold seal was more visible than it had been on Evelyn's kitchen table. An eagle, a shield, formal lettering circling the emblem. Mercer's eyes narrowed. He turned the case slightly. "What's that?" Harlan asked. Mercer didn't answer. "Deputy, I recognize the seal." Harlan held out his hand. Mercer hesitated, then passed him the case. Harlan examined the outside. "Federal Judiciary," Mercer said quietly. Danielle's eyes remained fixed on him. Harlan glanced at Evelyn. "You work for the federal government?" "No." "Then why do you have this?" Evelyn's expression changed. For the first time since Harlan approached the table, something close to protectiveness entered her voice. "That belongs to me." Harlan opened the case. Inside, nestled against dark fabric, rested a commemorative medal. It wasn't extravagant, it wasn't jeweled, but it had weight. Official weight. Harlan lifted it. Mercer leaned closer. Words had been engraved beneath the seal. To Evelyn Carter, for everything that came before. Mercer read them twice. Something about the phrase unsettled him. He looked at Evelyn, then at Danielle. Danielle's expression confirmed what his instincts were already telling him. This object meant something, something Harlan didn't understand. "Who gave you this?" Mercer asked. Evelyn looked at him. "That has nothing to do with why your sheriff put his hands on me." Mercer went still. She was right. Harlan gave a short laugh. "This what we're worried about? Some souvenir?" He tossed the medal back into the case. Danielle flinched. "Don't do that." Harlan looked at her. "What?" "That matters to her." Harlan snapped the case shut. "Then she should leave it at home." He shoved it toward Mercer. "Put the junk back." Mercer didn't. Not immediately. He stared at the gold seal. Then his eyes drifted toward the front windows. Danielle noticed. "What is it?" she asked. Mercer looked at her. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. The seal was familiar because Mercer had seen similar presentation cases at federal ceremonies, and people did not usually carry them around by accident. "Sheriff," he said carefully, "I think we need to stop." Harlan stared at him. "You think?" "Yes." The word surprised everyone, especially Mercer. Harlan stepped close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "You want to keep wearing that badge?" Mercer's face tightened. There it was. Not an argument, not a legal explanation. A threat. Mercer looked around the restaurant, at the witnesses, at Danielle's phone, at Evelyn's broken glasses. Then he looked at the badge on his own chest. His courage lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then he lowered his eyes. Harlan took the case from him, dropped it into Evelyn's purse, and handed the purse back. Outside. Evelyn didn't move. Why? Because I'm done asking. You haven't told me what I've done. Harlan grabbed her arm again. Danielle raised the phone higher. I'm still recording. Good, Harlan said. Record this. He began pushing Evelyn toward the front. The restaurant divided around them. Chairs shifted. People pulled their legs out of the aisle. They made room for the sheriff. Not for Evelyn. She walked slowly because without her glasses, the floor blurred beneath her feet. Danielle stayed several steps behind, phone raised. Mercer followed. Linda remained by the register. As Evelyn passed her, she stopped. Harlan tugged her arm. Keep moving. Evelyn looked toward Linda's blurred shape. You knew we did nothing wrong. Linda's lips parted. No answer came. Evelyn waited 1 second longer. Then she nodded. Not forgiveness, understanding. That somehow made Linda look even smaller. The front door opened. Georgia Heat rushed inside. Before crossing the threshold, Evelyn turned her head toward the dining room. 30 adults sat beneath warm chandeliers. 30 adults had watched. Some looked ashamed. Some frightened. Some stared at their plates. Nobody stood. Nobody followed. Nobody said stop. The door closed behind Evelyn. Inside, the Hawthorne grill remained silent. Outside, sunlight hit her face with blinding force. Harlan pushed her toward his patrol SUV. Behind them, Mercer paused beneath the restaurant awning and looked down at his body camera. A tiny red light blinked against his uniform. Recording. He touched it once. Then his eyes moved toward Evelyn's purse, toward the black case hidden inside it. And for the first time that afternoon, Ryan Mercer understood that whatever Sheriff Robert Harlan thought he was controlling had already begun to move beyond him. The heat outside the Hawthorne grill felt different after the cool dining room. It rose from the asphalt in shimmering waves and pressed against Evelyn's skin. Cars reflected hard white sunlight. Somewhere beyond the parking lot, traffic moved steadily along Jefferson Avenue. Ordinary people driving through an ordinary Sunday afternoon. Harlan kept one hand clamped around Evelyn's arm. Over there. He pointed toward his patrol SUV. Evelyn stumbled once. Without her glasses, the parking lines beneath her feet blurred into pale streaks. Danielle immediately moved closer. Grandma, watch the curb. Harlan turned. I told you to stay back. She can't see. She can walk. Her glasses are broken because of you. Danielle. Evelyn's voice stopped her. She found the curb with the toe of her shoe and stepped down carefully. I'm all right. She wasn't. Her lip throbbed. Her hip hurt where it had struck the table. Her arm burned beneath Harlan's grip. But Danielle heard what her grandmother actually meant. Don't give him another excuse. So she stayed several feet away. The phone remained raised. The recording timer continued. Harlan reached the patrol SUV and turned Evelyn toward the hood. Hands on the vehicle. Evelyn stared at him. Why? Hands on their vehicle. I've asked you what I've done. And I've told you to cooperate. That isn't an answer. Harlan took her wrist and placed her palm against the hood. Evelyn flinched. The dark metal had been sitting beneath the Georgia sun. Danielle stepped forward. That hood is hot. Back up. Move her to the shade. Harlan ignored her. Evelyn slowly placed her other hand beside the first. The heat bit into her palms. She breathed through it. One breath, then another. The same way she had breathed through 28 years of long shifts. Through losing Carver Street. Through job interviews that ended the moment someone saw her age. Through every quiet humiliation she had survived without allowing it to decide who she became. Behind them, the restaurant windows were filling with faces. People had left their tables. Now they stood behind the glass, watching, still not coming outside. Evelyn saw only vague shapes without her glasses, but she knew what they were. Witnesses. Danielle saw them clearly. Her anger sharpened. They can see you, she said to Harlan. Good. No. I mean, all of them can see exactly what you're doing. Harlan turned toward her camera. I've given you enough warnings, and I'm standing back. You're interfering. I'm documenting. Mercer came through the restaurant door. He stopped beneath the awning. The red light on his body camera was still blinking. Harlan saw him. Call it in. Mercer hesitated. For what? Harlan stared. Mercer corrected himself. What do you want me to call in? Suspicious person. Failure to cooperate. Run her information. Danielle nearly lowered the phone from disbelief. Suspicious person doing what? Harlan ignored her. Mercer touched his shoulder radio. Dispatch, Unit 12. Static crackled. Go ahead, 12. Mercer gave Evelyn's name after taking it from her wallet. The response took less than a minute. It felt much longer. Evelyn stood with both hands on the hood. A bead of sweat moved down the side of her face. Danielle kept filming. Behind the restaurant windows, the crowd watched. Then Mercer's radio came alive. Unit 12, Irene. Correction. Evelyn Carter comes back clear. No active warrants. No criminal history located. Valid Georgia identification. Mercer looked at Harlan. There you go. Harlan said nothing. Mercer lowered his voice. She's clear. Evelyn turned her head slightly. May I go now? This was the moment. Everyone felt it. Danielle did. Mercer did. Even Linda, standing behind the glass, seemed to understand. The sheriff had been given an exit. He could release Evelyn. He could call it a misunderstanding. Nothing could erase what had happened inside, but he could stop making it worse. Harlan looked toward the restaurant. He saw the faces. He saw Danielle's phone. He saw Mercer waiting, and something in his expression hardened. Backing down now would mean admitting that Evelyn had been right, that he had been wrong. His pride couldn't tolerate it. No. Mercer stared at him. Sheriff. She refused lawful instructions. What lawful instruction? Harlan turned slowly. Mercer immediately knew he had crossed the invisible line again. Harlan stepped closer. You want to have this conversation in front of everybody? Mercer looked toward Danielle's phone, then at his own body camera. Yes, he said quietly. Maybe we should. Harlan's face went still. For a moment, Danielle thought Mercer might finally do it, might finally stand between Evelyn and the man he served. Then Harlan spoke softly. Remember your mortgage, Ryan. Mercer froze. 4 words, that was all. Danielle didn't understand them. Mercer did. His wife had recently changed jobs. His paycheck carried most of the household expenses. Harlan knew it because Harlan knew everything about the deputies beneath him. Mercer's eyes dropped. Evelyn watched him. Even through blurred vision, she understood the surrender. She felt no anger toward him in that moment. Only sadness. Fear had built Harlan's authority as surely as elections had. Harlan reached behind his belt. Metal flashed in the sunlight. Handcuffed. Danielle's voice rose. No. Harlan opened one cuff. Ratchet. Ratchet. Sheriff, don't do this, Mercer said. Harlan ignored him. Evelyn slowly removed her palms from the hood. Her skin was red from the heat. Put them back. She didn't. Instead, she turned. The movement was careful, dignified. She stood facing Harlan with her swollen lip and stained church dress. You checked my name. Turn around. You found nothing. Turn around. I have no record. Harlan stepped toward her. Evelyn did not step away. Her eyes were wet now, but her voice remained level. Remember what you're doing. Something flickered in Harlan's face. Perhaps the words from inside returned to him. You still have time to let go. He had been offered another door. This was the last one. Turn around. Evelyn did. Not because he had earned obedience, because she understood that resisting physically would give him the story he wanted. Harlan took her left wrist. Click, the cuff closed. Danielle's breath caught. Then the right. Click. Evelyn's shoulders tightened as the metal settled around her wrists. Harlan checked the cuffs. Danielle's camera caught everything. A 70-year-old black woman in a cream church dress stood handcuffed beside a police SUV after dispatch had just announced she had no warrants and no criminal history. Behind the glass, nobody moved. Evelyn lifted her head. Her reflection appeared faintly in the restaurant window. For a second, she saw herself as the room must have seen her, bruised, disheveled, restrained, powerless. Then she remembered Walter's grocery bag, Ruth's appointment, Danielle across the table, the hands that had folded hospital linens, repaired strangers' clothes, served meals, and opened her front door to people who needed somewhere to sit. Harlan could put metal around those hands. He could not decide what they meant. Danielle's phone vibrated. She almost ignored it. The recording was still running. Then it vibrated again. A message appeared across the top of the screen. Marcus, outside. Danielle stared at the words. Her expression changed so suddenly that Mercer noticed. What is it? She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly lowered the phone just enough to look toward Jefferson Avenue. Harlan saw the movement and smiled. Finally taking my advice? Danielle looked at him. For the first time since the confrontation began, there was something in her eyes other than fear and anger, almost disbelief. No, Harlan frowned. Danielle raised the camera again. I'm making sure I get what happens next. A low engine sound came from the entrance to the parking lot. Mercer turned first, then Danielle. Then several faces behind the restaurant windows shifted in the same direction. A black SUV was turning off Jefferson Avenue. It moved slowly beneath the afternoon glare. Dark paint, tinted windows, government plates. Mercer's face changed. He looked at the vehicle, then at Evelyn's purse, then at the memory of the faded gold federal seal. The pieces were beginning to move toward each other. Harlan didn't see it yet. He merely stepped away from Evelyn and placed one hand on his belt as the SUV rolled across the parking lot. No siren, no flashing lights, no rush. It didn't need any of those things. The vehicle came to a smooth stop 15 feet from Harlan's patrol SUV. The engine shut off. For one long second, nothing happened. Evelyn stood in handcuffs beneath the Georgia sun. Danielle held her breath. Mercer stared at the government plates, and behind the Hawthorne Grill's glass windows, the same people who had watched in silence leaned closer. Then the rear door of the black SUV opened. A polished black shoe touched the asphalt. Then Marcus Carter stepped into the Georgia sunlight. He was 47, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed almost too formal for a Sunday restaurant parking lot. His white shirt was crisp despite the heat. His dark tie sat perfectly straight. He closed the door behind him. Another door opened, then another. 2 U.S. Marshals stepped out, both in dark suits, their movements controlled and watchful. Ryan Mercer recognized what he was seeing immediately. His stomach tightened. Robert Harlan did not. He saw 3 strangers entering a scene he believed belonged to him. Harlan stepped forward. Hold it right there. Marcus kept walking. I said stop. Marcus didn't appear to hear him. His attention had moved past the sheriff, past Mercer, past Danielle, to Evelyn. At first he seemed unable to understand what he was seeing. His mother stood beside a sheriff's patrol SUV with her hands cuffed behind her back. Her cream church dress was wrinkled. A small red stain marked the collar. Her lip was swollen. Without her glasses, she squinted into the sunlight. Marcus stopped. Everything about him changed. The calm authority with which he had stepped from the SUV disappeared beneath something much older, and more personal. For an instant, he wasn't a man in an expensive suit. He was simply a son looking at his mother and realizing somebody had hurt her. "Mom?" The word crossed the parking lot. Quiet. Disbelieving. Devastated. Evelyn lifted her head. She knew the voice before she could clearly see his face. "Marcus?" Danielle closed her eyes for half a second. Relief hit her so hard her knees nearly weakened. Marcus started toward Evelyn. Harlan moved into his path. "Sir, you need to step back." Marcus stopped, not because Harlan had ordered him to, because he had finally noticed the man standing between him and his mother. "What happened to her?" His voice was low. Harlan raised one hand. "This is an active law enforcement matter." Marcus looked at the hand, then at Harlan's badge, then back at Evelyn. "Why is my mother in handcuffs?" Harlan's expression shifted slightly. "Mother." He glanced toward Evelyn, then Marcus. Danielle kept filming. Mercer stood completely still. One of the marshals stepped closer, but said nothing. Harlan recovered quickly. "Your mother refused lawful instructions and interfered with an investigation." Danielle couldn't remain silent. "That is not what happened." Harlan spun toward her. "I told you." Marcus's head turned. "Danielle?" She looked at him. "Uncle Marcus." That changed the air again. Marcus looked from his niece to his mother. Then he saw Danielle's phone. You recorded it?" "All of it." Harlan's face tightened. "Enough. This is county jurisdiction. You people need to back away from my detainee." One of the marshals exchanged a look with the other. Marcus stared at Harlan. "My mother is your detainee?" "She is, until I determine otherwise." Evelyn spoke. "Marcus." He immediately looked at her. "I'm all right." He took in the bruise beginning to darken along her cheek. "No, you're not. I'm standing." "That isn't the same thing." For the first time, Evelyn's composure nearly broke. There were people in the world who could make you feel safe simply by arriving. Not because they were powerful, because they knew you. Marcus knew the difference between his mother's brave voice and her truthful one. He stepped around Harlan. The sheriff caught his arm. It happened quickly, not violently, but unmistakably. Marcus stopped. The nearest marshal moved instantly. "Sheriff, remove your hand." Harlan looked at him. "And who exactly are you?" The marshal opened his jacket enough to show his credentials. "United States Marshals Service." Harlan's hand dropped from Marcus's sleeve. Behind the restaurant windows, several people visibly reacted. Mercer exhaled slowly. He had known. The government plates, the seal, the case. Now he knew something else. Whatever connection Evelyn Carter had to the federal judiciary, it was not ceremonial. Harlan looked between the two marshals. "What are federal marshals doing here?" Neither answered. Marcus continued toward Evelyn. This time Harlan didn't touch him. When Marcus reached her, he stopped a foot away. His eyes moved over every detail. The swelling at her lip, the red mark on her dress, the reddened skin on her palms, the metal around her wrists. Who did this? Evelyn didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her eyes shifted toward Harlan. Marcus followed them. His jaw tightened. Then he noticed something on the ground beside the patrol SUV. A tiny fragment of clear plastic. Part of Evelyn's broken eyeglass lens had caught in the fold of her dress and fallen outside. Marcus bent and picked it up. He stared at it in his palm. His mother had worn glasses for as long as he could remember. As an adult, he had bought her 3 expensive pairs. She had returned every one. Perfectly good glasses at home, she always said. The pair broken inside the restaurant had been repaired twice. Marcus closed his fingers around the fragment. "Where are her glasses?" "Inside," Danielle said. Marcus looked at Harlan. You dragged a 70-year-old woman outside when she couldn't see properly. She refused to cooperate. With what? Harlan didn't answer directly. Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but you don't walk into my county and interrogate me. Marcus became very still. Danielle knew that stillness. She had seen it once in a courtroom when Marcus attended one of her early legal aid hearings. He never needed to raise his voice when he became angry. He became quieter. Your county? Harlan hooked his thumbs near his belt. You heard me. Marcus looked around. At the restaurant, at the faces behind the windows, at Mercer, at Danielle's recording phone, then back at his mother. Mom, why were you here? Birthday lunch. The answer almost broke him. You were celebrating? Evelyn managed a faint smile. Danielle was spending too much money. Danielle gave a shaky laugh that turned into something close to a sob. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Then he reached toward Evelyn's cheek, but stopped before touching the bruise. Does it hurt? A little. Your wrists? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. Harlan shifted impatiently. If the family reunion is over. Marcus turned. The look on his face stopped the sentence. One marshal stepped beside him. Sir, Harlan continued more cautiously, I have procedures to follow. Marcus glanced at Evelyn's handcuffs. Then follow them. I am. No. Mercer spoke. Everyone turned. The deputy stood beside the restaurant entrance, sunlight reflecting from the badge on his chest. His face was pale. No, Sheriff, you're not. Harlan stared at him. Mercer swallowed. Dispatch cleared Mrs. Carter. No warrants, no record. We had no complaint from the restaurant. No report of a crime. Mercer. And my camera is recording. Harlan's eyes dropped toward the red light on Mercer's chest. For the first time that afternoon, genuine uncertainty crossed his face. Marcus noticed. So did Danielle. Harlan looked toward the restaurant windows. The crowd that had refused to intervene was still there. But the silence had changed. Before, it had protected him. Now it was watching him. He turned back toward Marcus. Who are you? Marcus said nothing. Harlan stepped closer. I asked you a question. One of the marshals shifted beside Marcus. Harlan's voice became harder, trying to reclaim the authority that had begun slipping away. You come onto an active scene with federal officers. You interfere with a county detention. And you expect me not to ask who you are? Marcus looked toward Evelyn. Her shoulders were tired. Her wrists were still cuffed. He had wanted to reach her before saying anything else, but Harlan had made that impossible. Marcus turned fully toward him. My name is Marcus Carter. Harlan waited. The name meant nothing to him. Yet. Marcus reached inside his suit jacket. Harlan's hand instinctively moved toward his belt. Both marshals immediately focused on him. Marcus stopped. Slowly, deliberately, he removed a leather credential wallet. He held it where Harlan could see. The sheriff's eyes moved across the identification. Once. Then again. The color began to leave his face. Marcus closed the wallet. United States District Court. Harlan's mouth parted. Marcus's voice remained quiet. I am Judge Marcus Carter. Nobody behind the restaurant windows moved. Nobody whispered. Even the distant traffic seemed to fade beneath the weight of the moment. Marcus looked toward Evelyn, then back at Harlan. And the 70-year-old woman you have standing in handcuffs under the Georgia sun is my mother. For the first time since Robert Harlan had entered the Hawthorne Grill, the sheriff had nothing to say. The change in Robert Harlan was almost imperceptible at first. His shoulders lowered. His hand moved away from his belt. The hard certainty in his face gave way to calculation. He looked at Marcus's credential wallet, then at the two U.S. Marshals standing behind him, then at Evelyn. A federal judge's mother. Those 4 words seemed to rearrange the entire parking lot for him. Judge Carter, Harlan finally said. The title came out differently than the way he had spoken to Evelyn. Carefully, respectfully. Danielle heard it. So did Evelyn. And that difference hurt almost as much as everything that had come before. One of the marshals stepped forward. Sheriff, remove Mrs. Carter's handcuffs. Harlan glanced at him. This is still my detention. Mercer spoke from behind him. Based on what? Harlan turned sharply. Mercer didn't look away this time. You heard dispatch, he said. She's clear. Harlan's face tightened. The marshal repeated himself. Remove the handcuffs. Harlan looked toward the restaurant. Faces crowded the windows. People who had watched him pull Evelyn through the dining room were now watching something else. Watching his authority meet a boundary. Harlan reached for the key ring on his belt. His fingers fumbled once. The keys struck his buckle with a small metallic sound. Danielle's phone caught it. Marcus didn't take his eyes off his mother. Harlan walked behind Evelyn. The first cuff opened. Click. Evelyn slowly brought one arm forward. A red mark circled her wrist. Marcus saw it. His jaw tightened. The second cuff opened. Evelyn's other arm fell free. She rubbed one wrist with the opposite hand. Harlan stepped back. For the first time since he had approached her table, there was physical distance between them. Marcus moved immediately to his mother. He took both her hands. They were hot. The skin of her palms was reddened from the hood of the patrol SUV. Mom. I'm okay. No. His voice caught. You don't have to tell me that. Evelyn looked at him. For one moment, the parking lot disappeared. No sheriff, no marshals, no camera. Just mother and son. She squeezed his fingers. I know. Marcus lowered his head. He pressed her hands gently against his forehead. Danielle turned her face away, wiping at her eyes without lowering the phone. Evelyn rested one hand against Marcus's head. You came. Of course I came. I thought you were going straight back. I changed the schedule. A tired smile touched Evelyn's bruised face. You always were stubborn. Marcus looked up at her. I learned from somebody. Behind them, Harlan cleared his throat. Judge Carter. Marcus remained beside Evelyn. Judge Carter, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Danielle looked at him in disbelief. A misunderstanding? Harlan ignored her. Marcus slowly stood. What part? I received resistance during a lawful inquiry. Mercer looked away. Harlan continued. Your mother refused to provide identification and became uncooperative. Evelyn's expression hardened slightly. Marcus noticed. Did she threaten you? Harlan hesitated. No. Threaten anyone else? No. Was there a complaint? Harlan didn't answer. Marcus looked at Mercer. No, Mercer said. Was she suspected of a crime? Mercer swallowed. Not that I was told. Marcus turned back to Harlan. So explain the misunderstanding. Harlan's eyes moved toward Danielle's phone, then to Mercer's body camera. He understood now that every answer mattered. I was trying to maintain order. Inside a restaurant where my mother was eating lunch, she refused instructions. Instructions to do what? Harlan's composure began to crack. I didn't know who she was. Silence. Danielle stopped breathing. Mercer's eyes closed briefly. Even Harlan seemed to realize the mistake a second too late. Marcus stared at him. What did you say? Harlan tried to repair it. I mean, I didn't know she was your mother. Marcus took one step forward. So if you had known? Judge, obviously this would have been handled differently. There it was, plain, unavoidable. Evelyn released Marcus's hand. Why? Everyone turned toward her. Harlan blinked. Ma'am? Why would it have been different? Harlan looked at Marcus, as though hoping the judge might rescue him from the question. Marcus said nothing. Evelyn stepped forward. Her movements were slow because her hips still hurt, but she stood on her own. If you'd known my son was a federal judge, you wouldn't have grabbed me. Harlan opened his mouth. If you'd known, Evelyn continued, you wouldn't have broken my glasses. Mrs. Carter, you wouldn't have searched my purse? Harlan's face reddened. You wouldn't have put my hands on that hot car? The parking lot was silent. You wouldn't have put me in handcuffs? Harlan finally said. That's not what I meant. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then her voice softened. That made everyone listen harder. My son's title didn't make me a person. Harlan froze. I was one before he arrived. Marcus lowered his eyes. Evelyn continued. I was one when you saw me sitting in that restaurant. She pointed toward the windows. I was one when you asked me questions you had no reason to ask. Her hand trembled slightly. I was one when nobody in there stood up. Several faces disappeared from the glass. Evelyn saw the movement. So don't tell me this would have been different if you'd known who my son was. She looked directly at Harlan. If I belonged to nobody important, would what you did suddenly be all right? No one answered. A breeze moved across the parking lot, carrying the smell of hot pavement and magnolia from somewhere beyond the building. Harlan stared at the ground. For the first time, his badge looked small. Marcus stepped beside his mother. My mother spent 28 years working in a hospital laundry, he said. After they outsourced her job, she altered clothes to keep herself going. She volunteers at a community kitchen. She drives people to appointments when they don't have transportation. His voice remained controlled. She didn't walk into that restaurant demanding special treatment. He glanced toward the Hawthorne Grill. She wanted lunch. Harlan looked at him. Marcus's voice dropped. She shouldn't have needed me to arrive. Evelyn touched his arm. That's enough. Marcus turned. She shook her head. Not because Harlan deserved protection, because she didn't want her son's power to become another version of the same thing she had just endured. Authority used to humiliate. Power used to make somebody smaller. That wasn't what she wanted. I don't want revenge, Evelyn said. Harlan looked at her. I want the truth. The words seemed to unsettle him more. Danielle lowered her phone slightly. What happens now? Marcus looked at the marshals. Before either could answer, Mercer stepped forward. His face had changed. The fear was still there, but something else had finally become stronger. Judge Carter. Marcus looked at him. Mercer touched the body camera on his chest. This recorded everything outside. Danielle lifted her phone. I have everything inside from when he grabbed her. Marcus nodded. The restaurant will have cameras too. Linda was standing just inside the entrance now. She heard him, her face drained of color. We do, she said. Harlan turned toward her. Linda flinched. That tiny reaction did not escape Marcus. Neither did it escape Evelyn. Mercer looked at Harlan. Then he made a decision that seemed to cost him something physically. His shoulders rose with one deep breath. There's more. Harlan's head snapped toward him. Ryan. Mercer ignored the warning. Marcus watched him carefully. What more? Mercer's eyes moved to Evelyn. Mrs. Carter wasn't the first person he stopped without a reason. Harlan stepped forward. Shut your mouth. One marshal immediately moved between them. Mercer went pale, but he kept speaking. There have been complaints. How many? Danielle asked. Mercer hesitated. I don't know the exact number. Harlan's voice turned cold. You're finished. Mercer looked at him. For years, those words would have ended the conversation. Not today. Maybe, Mercer said. Then he looked back at Marcus. But you need to know where they're kept. Harlan's expression changed completely. Not anger this time. Fear. Marcus saw it. So there are records? Mercer nodded. Some. Where? Mercer swallowed. At the sheriff's office. Harlan stepped around the marshal. You don't know what you're talking about. Mercer looked directly at him. Yes, I do. The red light on his body camera continued blinking. There's a locked records drawer in the administrative file room. Harlan went still. Mercer took another breath. Complaints that never made it into normal review. Danielle stared at him. Linda covered her mouth. Marcus's expression hardened. Evelyn felt something inside her sink. This was no longer only about a ruined birthday lunch. No longer only about her bruised face. She thought of the way Harlan had looked at her before asking a single question. The confidence with which he had acted. The certainty that nobody would stop him. Maybe that certainty had been practiced. Maybe the silence inside the Hawthorne grill wasn't the first silence that had protected him. Evelyn looked at Mercer. How long? Mercer couldn't meet her eyes. Years. The answer landed quietly. And suddenly Evelyn understood the most painful possibility of all. She might not have been the first person Robert Harlan had treated as though dignity belonged only to people with enough power to demand it. She was simply the first one whose hidden connection had brought a black government SUV into the parking lot before the story could disappear. 3 days later, the Hawthorne Grill parking lot looked ordinary again. Cars filled the spaces. Lunch customers came and went. The Georgia sun shone on the same dark pavement where Evelyn Carter had stood in handcuffs. But Millbrook was no longer ordinary. Danielle's video had not been posted publicly. Not yet. On Marcus's advice, she had preserved the original file, backed it up, and turned a copy over to investigators. Linda Whitmore had done the same with the Hawthorne Grill's security footage after receiving a formal preservation request. Ryan Mercer's body camera recording had been secured separately. 3 cameras, 3 angles, 1 story, and Robert Harlan could no longer control any of them. Evelyn spent those 3 days mostly at home. Her lip was healing. The marks around her wrists had begun to fade. Her glasses had been replaced temporarily with an older pair from the bedroom drawer. The cream dress hung inside a garment bag in the closet. She hadn't washed it. Not because she wanted to preserve the stain, because an investigator had asked her not to. Evidence. Evelyn hated the word. That dress had been birthday clothing when she put it on. Now it belonged to a case file. On Wednesday morning, she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea she had forgotten to drink. Marcus sat across from her. He had postponed his return long enough to make sure she was safe and represented by independent counsel. He had also done something Evelyn appreciated more than she had told him. He had stayed out of the investigation. No phone calls demanding arrests, no orders, no favors. He knew better. This couldn't become justice because a federal judge wanted justice for his mother. It had to become justice because the evidence demanded it. You need to go back to work, Evelyn said. Marcus looked over his coffee. You trying to get rid of me? You've rearranged enough. I can rearrange more. I know. She looked toward the hallway photograph. That's what worries me. Marcus smiled faintly. Then Evelyn became serious. Those complaints. Marcus's smile disappeared. What about them? Have they found them? I haven't asked. Evelyn looked at him. You haven't? I can't be involved that way, Mom. She understood. That didn't make waiting easier. The answer came that afternoon. Ryan Mercer had given investigators the location. Administrative file room, 2nd floor of the sheriff's office, back wall, gray filing cabinet, bottom drawer. The drawer was locked. The key was not in the normal records inventory. Investigators obtained authorization before opening it. What they found changed the case. 27 complaints. Some were handwritten, some were typed. Several had been placed in envelopes and never opened after being received. Others carried an internal stamp but no case number. No review signature, no disposition. Nothing showing they had traveled through the department's normal complaint process. 27 adults had tried to tell somebody something was wrong. And somehow their voices had ended up behind a lock. The investigators began calling them. One by one, a 59-year-old warehouse supervisor described being held beside his truck while Harlan searched it without finding anything. A 63-year-old home health aide said Harlan had questioned her outside an affluent neighborhood where she worked and refused to believe she had been invited into the house. A 41-year-old restaurant supplier described being stopped repeatedly on the same delivery route. A 74-year-old retired mechanic said he had filed a complaint after Harlan threatened to arrest him during a traffic dispute, only to hear nothing afterward. Different days, different places, different people, similar fear. Several complaints alleged discriminatory treatment toward Black or Latino adults. Others described intimidation of anyone who challenged Harlan's authority. Some allegations still needed investigation. Not every complaint automatically proved misconduct. But that wasn't the first question anymore. The first question was simpler. Why had so many complaints been hidden from normal review? By Friday morning, the state had opened a formal inquiry. Federal civil rights investigators were examining whether Evelyn's detention was part of a broader pattern. Harlan was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His badge and service weapon were temporarily surrendered. For 12 years, people had entered his office afraid of what he could do to them. Now investigators entered carrying evidence boxes. The reversal should have satisfied Evelyn. It didn't. She sat in New Hope Community Kitchen that Friday afternoon, peeling labels from donated cans, while Danielle read an update from her phone. 27, Danielle said. Evelyn stopped. Around them, volunteers stacked boxes beneath fluorescent lights. Walter Price sat nearby with his cane hooked over one knee. Ruth Coleman was folding paper bags at the end of the table. Both knew what had happened at the Hawthorne Grill. Neither had asked Evelyn for details. They were waiting for her to decide when she wanted to speak. 27 people? Evelyn asked. 27 complaints. Danielle lowered the phone. Investigators are contacting everyone they can. Evelyn stared at the can in her hands. How many had somebody like Marcus? Danielle said nothing. That was the question neither of them wanted to answer. Evelyn placed the can down. When that SUV arrived, everything changed. Because there were witnesses. No, Grandma. People were watching before Marcus got there. Danielle fell silent. Evelyn looked around the kitchen, at Walter, at Ruth, at adults who came through those doors every week because somewhere else in their lives, a door had closed. The cameras were already recording, Evelyn said. You were already recording. That deputy knew it was wrong. Her voice trembled. And still nobody moved until they found out whose mother I was. Walter slowly lowered his eyes. Evelyn wasn't crying. That somehow made Danielle want to cry for her. What about the 27 before me? Evelyn asked. Danielle pulled out the chair beside her. We don't know yet. That's what hurts. Evelyn looked at her granddaughter. I keep thinking about that locked drawer. Danielle waited. 27 people asking somebody to listen. Evelyn's fingers closed around the edge of the table. And somebody put them where nobody had to hear them. Danielle remembered the birthday lunch. People can survive a lot when they know somebody heard them. Now those words felt different, sharper. Then we make sure they're heard, Danielle said. Evelyn looked at her. How? We let the investigation work. And after that? Danielle understood the question. This wasn't only about prosecution. Evelyn wanted something that survived the case, something useful. You could sue, Danielle said carefully. I know. You have every right. I know that too. And if there's a settlement, Evelyn looked toward Ruth, who was carefully pretending not to listen. Then toward Walter. What happens to people who can't afford lawyers? Danielle didn't answer immediately. They come to places like mine. And how long do they wait? Too long. What about transportation? Same problem. Evelyn nodded slowly. The first shape of an idea appeared. Not revenge, infrastructure. A way for the next person, without a federal judge in the family, to be harder to ignore. Before Evelyn could say more, the kitchen door opened. Ryan Mercer entered. Conversation faded. He wasn't wearing a uniform, no badge, no duty belt, just jeans and a plain blue shirt. He looked younger without the equipment, and more tired. Danielle stood. What are you doing here? Mercer stopped several feet from Evelyn. I wanted to talk to Mrs. Carter. About what? My lawyer told me not to. Danielle crossed her arms. For once, maybe listen to somebody. I probably should. He looked at Evelyn. But there's something she deserves to hear from me. Evelyn studied him. Sit down. Mercer did. For several seconds, he stared at his hands. I knew about the drawer. Evelyn didn't react. Not everything in it, he continued. I didn't know there were 27. But I knew complaints were being kept out of normal review. Danielle's expression hardened. And you said nothing? No. Why? Mercer looked at her. Because I was afraid. Danielle gave a bitter laugh. So was she. I know. Mercer looked toward Evelyn. I watched him cross lines before, sometimes small ones, sometimes not. Every time I told myself I had bills, a mortgage, a career. I told myself somebody higher up would handle it. His voice lowered. Eventually, I stopped pretending I didn't know nobody was handling it. Evelyn watched him quietly. Mercer swallowed. I'm sorry. She didn't rescue him from the discomfort. Didn't say it was all right. Because it wasn't. Finally, she said, what are you going to do with being sorry? Mercer looked up. The question struck harder than anger. I've agreed to cooperate fully. With this case? With all of them. Evelyn nodded once. Then tell the truth. I will. Even when it costs you something. Mercer's face tightened. Yes, ma'am. Good. That was all. No absolution, no humiliation. Just responsibility. Mercer stood. At the door, he stopped. There's something else. Danielle looked at him. What? The internal audit started this morning. And? Mercer took a breath. The drawer wasn't the only thing they found. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Mercer glanced toward the windows, where late afternoon sunlight lay across the New Hope parking lot. There are missing review logs, camera files that were marked unavailable, stops that never made it into the complaint system. Danielle went still. How far back? At least 6 years. Evelyn looked down at her scarred hands. The story was growing again. What had happened in one restaurant was spreading through an entire department. And for the first time, she understood that the most important choice still hadn't been made. She could use Marcus's name to make Robert Harlan suffer, or she could use the attention now surrounding her own name to open every drawer the town had kept locked. Evelyn lifted her eyes. Danielle. Yes. Call your office. For what? Evelyn looked towards Walter's grocery bag on the counter, Ruth's transportation papers, and the worn blue New Hope apron hanging beside the kitchen door. For everybody who didn't have a black SUV coming. 8 months later, the federal courthouse in Atlanta was full before 9 in the morning. Outside, satellite trucks lined the curb beneath a gray spring sky, Reporters stood behind metal barriers, speaking into cameras while courthouse security guided people through the front doors. Inside courtroom 6B, Robert Harlan sat at the defense table. No uniform, no polished duty belt, no silver badge, just a dark suit, a legal pad, and 2 attorneys beside him. The transformation should have made him look ordinary. Instead, Evelyn thought it made something clearer. The badge had never been the man. It had only amplified what the man chose to do. She sat behind the prosecution table beside Danielle. Marcus was nowhere near the bench. He had recused himself from every official matter connected to the case from the beginning. He entered the courthouse through a side entrance as Evelyn's son, not as a judge involved in the proceeding, and took a seat in the gallery. When Evelyn looked back, Marcus gave her a small nod. Not encouragement to win, encouragement to tell the truth. That was enough. The investigation had taken months because investigators refused to build the case around one afternoon alone. The Hawthorne Grill video was reviewed. Danielle's recording was authenticated. Mercer's body camera footage was preserved. Dispatch records confirmed Evelyn had been cleared before Harlan handcuffed her. The locked drawer became part of a broader inquiry. Investigators interviewed adults whose complaints had been buried, examined missing review logs, and compared official reports with surviving recordings. Not every allegation could be proven. Some were too old, some lacked enough evidence. But the pattern investigators could establish was serious enough that Harlan faced federal civil rights charges connected to proven misconduct, including Evelyn's detention. Now a jury would hear it. Danielle squeezed her grandmother's hand. "You okay?" Evelyn looked toward Harlan. "Yes. You don't have to look at him." "I know." She kept looking anyway. Months earlier, she had seen him standing over her in a restaurant, enormous beneath the authority of his uniform. Today he seemed smaller, not because Evelyn had gained power, because the room required him to answer to the same rules as everyone else. The prosecution's most difficult evidence was also the simplest. Video. On a large courtroom screen, the Hawthorne Grill appeared beneath its warm yellow lights. Evelyn saw herself sitting beside Danielle. She saw Harlan approach. He demanded identification. She asked why. He ordered her to leave. She refused. Then came the moment when his hand closed around her arm. Even though Evelyn knew it was coming, her body tightened. The chair scraped. Her glasses fell. The courtroom speakers carried the sharp crack when they struck the floor. Marcus lowered his eyes. Then came Evelyn's voice. "You don't have to hurt me." Nobody in the courtroom moved. The video continued. Mercer searching the purse, the Bible, the New Hope keys, the black presentation case, then the restaurant door, the parking lot, the hot patrol SUV, dispatch clearing her, Harlan continuing anyway, and finally the handcuffs. Click. Evelyn looked down at her wrists. The marks were gone. The memory wasn't. Ryan Mercer testified the next morning. He wore a plain gray suit and looked uncomfortable under the courtroom lights. The prosecutor asked him whether Evelyn had committed a crime before Harlan approached her. No. Was there a complaint from the restaurant? No. Did Mrs. Carter threaten Sheriff Harlan? No. Did she threaten anyone? No. After dispatch cleared her, did you believe there was a lawful reason to continue holding her? Mercer paused. No. The prosecutor allowed the answer to settle. Then why didn't you stop him? Mercer's eyes moved briefly toward Evelyn. Because I was afraid of him. The defense attorney stood during cross-examination. You were a sworn deputy, correct? Yes. You had authority? Yes. You expect this jury to believe you knowingly allowed misconduct because you were afraid for your job? Mercer swallowed. My job, my mortgage, my future. So you're blaming Sheriff Harlan for your own cowardice? Mercer's face tightened. No. The answer surprised Danielle. Mercer continued. My cowardice belongs to me. The courtroom went quiet. But fear was how he kept people around him from challenging him. I participated in that silence. I'm not proud of it. Evelyn watched him return to his seat. Months earlier, she had asked what he intended to do with being sorry. Now she had her answer. Danielle testified later that afternoon. She described the birthday lunch, the questions, the recording, the moment dispatch cleared Evelyn, then the message on her phone. Marcus, outside. The defense tried to suggest that Marcus's arrival had transformed an ordinary local encounter into a federal controversy. Danielle didn't argue. She simply said, "My uncle's arrival didn't change what had already been recorded." On the fourth day, Evelyn took the stand. She wore a simple cream blouse and dark skirt. Her gold cross rested at her throat. The prosecutor approached gently. "Mrs. Carter, when Sheriff Harlan first asked you for identification, did you tell him your son was a federal judge?" "No." "Why not?" Evelyn looked toward the jury. "Because it shouldn't have mattered." The prosecutor waited. Evelyn continued. "I was sitting at a table I had every right to sit at. I hadn't threatened anyone. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't hurt anybody." Her voice remained calm. "If I had said, 'Be careful, my son is a judge,' then what would that mean?" Nobody answered. "It would mean he should treat me decently because somebody powerful might hold him accountable." She shook her head. "That isn't dignity. That's fear of consequences." Marcus stared at his mother. Evelyn looked toward Harlan. "I wanted him to treat me like a human being before he knew anybody important loved me." Harlan lowered his eyes. The prosecutor asked, "What hurt you most that day?" Evelyn thought of the chair, the glasses, the handcuffs, but none of those came first. The silence. Several jurors looked up. "The sheriff hurt me," Evelyn said, "but a whole room watched him decide I didn't belong there. They knew I hadn't done anything. His own deputy knew, the owner knew, and everybody waited for somebody else to be brave." Her eyes glistened. "Then my son arrived, and suddenly everybody understood something was wrong." She paused, but it was wrong before the SUV arrived. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. Evelyn waited in a quiet courthouse room with Danielle and Marcus. Nobody talked much. When the message came that the jury had reached a verdict, Marcus stood first. Evelyn remained seated for another second. Then she rose. The courtroom filled again. Harlan stood beside his attorneys. The clerk read the verdicts. Guilty on the central civil rights charges arising from the conduct the government had proven. Harlan's shoulders sank. He did not look at Evelyn. There was no cheering. Evelyn didn't want cheering. Justice was not a football game. Weeks later, sentencing brought a substantial federal prison term and the permanent end of Harlan's law enforcement career. Separate administrative findings led to outside oversight of the department, stricter complaint tracking, independent review procedures, and mandatory preservation of body camera records. The 27 complaints from the locked drawer were transferred for independent examination, rather than returned to the system that had buried them. Some complainants received answers. Some received apologies. Several investigations remained open. It wasn't perfect. It was simply no longer hidden. Outside the courthouse after sentencing, microphones crowded toward Evelyn. "Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Carter, how do you feel?" "Judge Carter's mother, over here." That phrase stopped her. Judge Carter's mother, again. Marcus heard it too. He looked at Evelyn. She turned toward the microphones. The reporters quieted. A camera light glowed red. "My son is a good man," Evelyn said, "and I'm proud of him." Marcus's face softened. "But before I was Judge Carter's mother, I had a name." The reporters went still. Evelyn stepped closer to the microphones. "My name is Evelyn Carter." A reporter lowered his notebook slightly. Evelyn continued. I washed hospital linens for 28 years. I altered clothes when I lost that job. I serve meals at New Hope because people deserve to eat, whether they can pay or not. She looked directly into the nearest camera. The worst thing that happened to me wasn't that Sheriff Harlan didn't know my son was a judge. She paused. It was that he thought he needed to know. Behind her, Danielle's eyes filled. Evelyn looked across the courthouse steps at the people gathered behind the barriers. I don't want my name remembered because somebody powerful came to rescue me. Her voice softened. I want it remembered because nobody should need rescuing by somebody powerful before the truth matters. For several seconds, nobody asked another question. Then one reporter called out, "Mrs. Carter, what will you do now?" Evelyn looked at Danielle. Months earlier, they had sat beneath fluorescent lights at New Hope and talked about lawyers, transportation, and all the people who never had a black SUV coming. Now Evelyn smiled. We're going to make sure the next person doesn't have to wait for one. Marcus looked at her. He understood immediately. The trial had ended, but Evelyn Carter was not finished. And this time, when she walked down the courthouse steps, the cameras followed her not because she was a federal judge's mother. They followed because the woman they had overlooked had finally made them learn her name. By early summer, the cameras were gone. That was how Evelyn preferred it. The satellite trucks disappeared from the courthouse. Reporters stopped parking outside New Hope Community Kitchen. The Hawthorne Grill was no longer mentioned every evening on local television. Millbrook returned to its ordinary sounds. Lawn mowers on Saturday mornings. Church bells on Sunday. Buses sighing at the corner of Franklin Avenue. Ice clinking in glasses behind restaurant windows. But ordinary did not mean unchanged. At New Hope, Danielle stood inside a freshly painted office beside a folding table covered with forms. A small sign on the door read, Community Legal and Transportation Desk. No marble lobby, no expensive furniture, 2 donated computers, 3 metal filing cabinets, a coffee maker Walter Price insisted was necessary for serious legal thinking, and a row of chairs for adults who needed help. Evelyn stood in the doorway. You put my name too big. Danielle turned toward the plaque beside the desk. The Evelyn Carter Access Fund. You've said that 6 times. Because you haven't fixed it. Danielle smiled. It stays. Evelyn shook her head. Part of the civil settlement connected to her case had been directed into the fund at her request. Community donations followed. But Evelyn insisted on strict rules. The money would not be used for ceremonies. It would not buy commemorative dinners. It would not pay for anyone to put her face on a billboard. It would help low-income adults reach legal appointments, obtain transportation, understand complaint procedures, and find representation before their voices disappeared into another locked drawer. That mattered to her. The rest did not. Ruth Coleman entered carrying a folder. I've got my appointment Tuesday. Danielle looked up. Transportation is already scheduled. Ruth smiled. See, this is why we keep you around. Evelyn laughed. What am I here for? Ruth looked at her. You make the coffee. Walter called from across the kitchen. She makes terrible coffee. Evelyn pointed at him. You were begging for my groceries 9 months ago. I was recovering. You were complaining. I can do both. Laughter moved through the room. It was small, warm, normal. Evelyn had missed normal. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived from Linda Whitmore. Evelyn recognized the handwriting. She left it unopened until evening. Then she sat on her porch beneath the slow turn of the ceiling fan and read it. Linda did not ask forgiveness. Evelyn appreciated that. She wrote that she had watched the security footage repeatedly and had finally stopped telling herself she had been frightened, confused, or unsure what was happening. She had known. She simply had not acted. The Hawthorne Grill had adopted new staff procedures requiring employees to report harassment or discriminatory treatment, rather than treating silence as neutrality. Linda had also begun providing regular financial support and Sunday meals to New Hope. At the bottom of the letter was one sentence. I cannot change what I failed to do, but I can decide what I do the next time courage costs me something. Evelyn folded the letter. She sat for a while listening to cicadas beyond the porch. Then she placed it inside the small table beside her chair. Not forgiven, not rejected, received. Sometimes that was the first honest step. 3 Sundays later, Danielle called. Grandma, don't get mad. That sentence has never been followed by anything good. Linda called me. Evelyn sighed. What does she want? She wants to invite you back to the Hawthorne. No. That's what I told her you'd say. Good. So I told Marcus. Evelyn sat upright. You did what? Danielle laughed. He said you'd say no too. Smart man. Then he said something else. Evelyn waited. He said maybe going back isn't for Linda. Silence. Evelyn looked toward the hallway. Her cream church dress was still stored away. She had never worn it again. The stain had been preserved during the case, then professionally cleaned after the evidence hold ended. But Evelyn couldn't bring herself to put it on. Some memories lived in fabric. Grandma? I heard you. You don't have to go. I know. That Sunday, Evelyn stood outside the Hawthorne Grill at 12:30. She wore pale blue, not cream. Marcus stood beside her in an open-collar shirt and dark jacket. No marshals, no government SUV. He had driven his own car from Atlanta after arranging his schedule around lunch. Evelyn looked at the front door. You could have picked somewhere else. Marcus smiled. So could you. I haven't decided to go in. We've been standing here 4 minutes. I'm thinking. Take your time. Through the glass, Evelyn could see the dining room, the same chandeliers, the same polished tables, the same swinging kitchen doors. Her body remembered before her mind could stop it. The scrape of the chair, the broken glasses, the hand on her arm. Marcus noticed her fingers trembling. He didn't touch her. He simply stood beside her. Evelyn took one breath, then another. I won't let that man decide where I can eat. Marcus nodded. No, ma'am. She opened the door. The restaurant quieted. Not completely, but enough. Several customers recognized her. A server stopped near the bar. Linda appeared from beside the register. For a second, nobody moved. Then Linda walked forward. She looked older than Evelyn remembered, or perhaps just less protected by certainty. Mrs. Carter. Linda. I have your table ready. Evelyn glanced toward the back. The old table beside the kitchen doors was empty. Linda shook her head. Not that one. She led them toward a table beside the front windows. Sunlight fell across a white cloth. Evelyn stopped. Why this table? Linda looked confused. I thought you'd prefer. I don't need the best table. Linda's face changed. Evelyn continued gently. I needed you to believe I deserved any table. Linda lowered her eyes. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn chose a small booth halfway across the room. Nothing special. That was the point. Marcus sat opposite her. A server brought sweet tea. Evelyn lifted the glass. Birthday lunch, 8 months late. Marcus smiled. I thought Danielle bought the birthday lunch. She did. Then what are we celebrating? Evelyn considered the question. Being hungry. Marcus laughed. The sound loosened something inside her. They ordered fried chicken, green beans, cornbread, and far too much dessert. For 20 minutes, nobody mentioned Harlan. Nobody mentioned the trial. Nobody mentioned judges or lawsuits or cameras. Marcus complained about airport coffee. Evelyn complained about Marcus's inability to iron a shirt properly. He accused her of exaggerating. She reminded him who taught him. Then the peach cobbler arrived. Evelyn took 2 bites. She pushed half of it across the table. Marcus stared at the plate. You ordered this. I can't finish it. You always say that after eating half. And you always finish it. He picked up his fork. You planned this. Evelyn smiled. Across the restaurant, Linda watched them. Then she turned toward the entrance. A small bronze plaque had been mounted beside the door. No photograph, no mention of Evelyn, no reference to the case. Only 7 words. Every person who enters here deserves dignity. Evelyn had approved the wording on one condition. Her name would not appear beneath it. Dignity didn't belong to her. That was the whole point. At home that evening, sunlight stretched across Evelyn's hallway. She placed her purse on the table. The little black federal case was no longer inside it. It rested in a drawer beneath the photograph of Marcus at the federal courthouse. Years earlier, after his first appointment to the bench, Marcus had presented the medal to his mother privately. Not because she had held public office. Not because she had earned a degree. Because every achievement people congratulated him for had been built on sacrifices they never saw. To Evelyn Carter, for everything that came before. She had carried it on her birthday because Marcus was supposed to meet them briefly after lunch before returning to Atlanta. She had planned to tease him about giving his mother something too fancy to keep in a drawer. Instead, strangers had found it first. For months, people had treated that medal as proof Evelyn was secretly important. They had misunderstood. The medal wasn't what made her important. It was only evidence that one person had understood what she had always been worth. Evelyn closed the drawer. Then she looked down at her hands. The wrists had healed completely, but the hands themselves still carried 70 years. Small scars, work-thickened fingers, a faint mark from a sewing needle near one thumb. Hands that had washed hospital linens for 28 years. Hands that had altered clothes when money ran short. Hands that had carried grocery bags to Walter. Hands that had helped Ruth arrange rides. Hands that had served meals without asking who could pay. Hands that had raised Marcus. Hands that had held Danielle. Hands Robert Harlan had once locked in metal because he thought authority gave him the right to decide whose dignity mattered. He had been wrong. The federal investigation had changed a department. The trial had ended a sheriff's career. The independent reviews had finally opened complaints buried for years. Linda had been forced to confront her silence. Mercer had learned that knowing something was wrong was not the same as standing against it. Danielle's legal work had found a new purpose. Marcus's arrival had changed the balance of power in a parking lot. But none of those things were the real measure of Evelyn Carter. The measure was simpler. She had possessed dignity before anyone defended it. She had possessed worth before anyone recognized it. And when power finally came to her side, she used it not to humiliate the people who had failed her, but to make it harder for the next ordinary person to be ignored. Outside, evening settled over Millbrook. A bus sighed at the corner. Somewhere down the street, a screen door closed. Evelyn stepped onto her porch and watered the flowers along the railing. Tomorrow she would go back to New Hope. There would be bags to pack, forms Danielle needed help organizing. Walter would complain about the coffee. Ruth would probably bring too much food. Ordinary things. Evelyn smiled. After everything, ordinary felt beautiful. And somewhere across town, beside the entrance to a restaurant where an entire room had once chosen silence, 7 words waited beneath the warm yellow light. Every person who enters here deserves dignity. The black SUV had revealed Evelyn's hidden connection, but it had never revealed her worth. That had been there all along. So if you had been sitting in the Hawthorne Grill that Sunday afternoon, watching Evelyn stand alone while everyone else stayed silent, would you have broken the silence? What stays with me is Evelyn Carter standing there after everything she'd endured and choosing to open doors for the people who would never have a black SUV coming for them. She could have used that moment to settle a personal score, but instead she made sure 27 buried voices could no longer be hidden behind a locked drawer. That's the lesson here. Silence doesn't have to be hateful to help injustice survive. Sometimes a wrong continues simply because too many decent people are waiting for somebody else to speak first. So today, if you see someone being treated unfairly, don't assume another person will handle it. You don't have to become a hero. Sometimes you can simply stand beside them, ask if they're okay, document what happened safely, or say, "I saw that too," because Evelyn's story shows how much one honest witness can matter. If you had been inside the Hawthorne Grill when Harlan grabbed Evelyn, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments. I think the answer is worth thinking about. And stay with me, because the next story begins with another ordinary person. Everyone thinks they understand, until one small detail changes the entire room.